Hello and welcome to episode 39 of the DX Mentor, a discussion about 2023 DX Year in Review. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill, AJ8B. If this is the first time you're tuning in, welcome. We have a back catalog of over 30 episodes covering many aspects of DX in both podcast and YouTube format. Please check it out. If you like what you find, please subscribe and like those particular episodes that you really enjoyed. If you don't, please drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com so that I can get better. Our guests today are Joe Reiser, W1JR, and Bernie McClenny, W3UR. Bernie publishes the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST Magazine. For 18 years, Joe Reiser has taken Bernie's data, as well as data from other sources, and then published a DX Year in Review. I know we're a few weeks late in bringing you this information, but the discussion is excellent, and I know you will enjoy it. And as always, Joe, W8GEX, will be with us. So without any further delay, let's get started. So I want to welcome everybody to the DX Mentor podcast. And we're really excited tonight to have some really good friends with us. Joe and I always look forward to these, and tonight's an especially exciting one. And we have Joe Reiser, W1JR, and Bernie McClenny, W3UR. And what we're going to talk about is this really excellent document that gets put out every year that I'm finding more useful the more DX I try to hunt, and the better at this I think I'm getting. The historical aspect and the information I get from it is just terrific. And it is a DXCC Year in Review. So we're going to talk to these guys about how it gets put together, what information goes in it. Bernie has kindly indicated that it's all on Joe, but I think Bernie has a piece of this too. We're going to explore that. So let's have our Joe, W8GEX, introduce himself and say hi.
Well, thanks, Bill, and it's a pleasure to be with these two guys tonight. I started ham radio 53 years ago. Like most of us, started off as a technician, got up through the ranks, got hooked on DXing on 6 meters back in the 70s, and I think I'm a big DXer ever since. I'm on the radio every day, working 30, 40 meters, whatever. So it's a pleasure to be with these guys tonight.
Great. And I have to admit, I may have you beat because I've been licensed 51 years, but I got my ticket when I was 3. So that's why I look so good. So also, Bernie, W3UR, you've been a guest before, and you're also a sponsor of the show, and we can't tell you how much we appreciate that. And so tell us a little about yourself. How'd you get into this, and what gets you excited about DX now?
Well, I started out working my first DX station. I got licensed in 1977. I worked, my first DX station was KZ5EK in the Canal Zone when it was a separate DXCC entity. And in fact, I was on 15 meter CW transmitting, and he was on sideband. He was down below, he was in the novice band. They were between 21,175 and 21,200. There were a lot of sideband stations, and I worked the guy, and I worked several other DX stations that way, including, believe it or not, I have at least two Syrian stations. They were VE stations, portable 4U1, operating in the Golan Heights. And yeah, I mean, that was really kind of rare, especially now, you know. But anyway, my dad was a ham. I got interested through him. I saw all the countries he was working. He had a little map on the wall, and he would put pins in it. And I go, I want to do that. I want to do that. So that's when I started in 1977. He got licensed the year before me.
Huh.
And I think one of your most impressive claims to fame, other than being in the 3000 Club and all those things, didn't you have the first novice DXCC? Do I have that right?
No, I was the second. Bill Tippett, now W4 Zulu Victor, was the first. I was on the honor roll at 27. I don't remember what age I was when I got them all. But yeah.
Well done. See, I'm hoping to be on the honor roll in 27. So, but we'll see. And finally, we have our guest, Joe Reiser, W1JR. JR. Same kind of question, Joe. How'd you get into this and what gets you excited?
Well, I was in the Boy Scouts. Eventually, I became an Eagle, but on the way up to first class, I chose the Morse code to be the option. There were 3 options, and I chose that rather than semaphore. That wouldn't have helped me with this option. And in there, I met a fella, and he got interested in me. And after we worked around, I found out he was building the largest radio transmitter in the world in the Munich area, a 1,000,000-watt AM station to penetrate the Iron Curtain at, I believe it was 76 kilohertz. At 76 kilohertz, the Russians couldn't stop him. And we got very interested. And one day he said to me, he says, I'm going back to install a station in Germany. And eventually he went to other countries. And he said, why don't you get a ham license so you could talk to me while I'm over here? Because I'm over more than half the year I spend over here. So he took me down to New York one day, and I became one of the first novices. I didn't even know that novice license had just been invented in 1951. So I guess I've been licensed for more than 70-something years. But I wanted to build a rig, and I didn't have anything, and we came from a very large, poor family. And one night he arrived at the house, and he had 3 boxes. And I said, what are those? And he says, the first one is a 6SN7 regen receiver. And the second one is a 6L6 transmitter. And the third one is a power supply. And I said, what is supposed to do with that? He says, well, build them up and get on the air when you get your license, because you just took the test in October and it's going to come through soon. So I said, there's no way I can pay you for this. I don't have any money. He says, I'll make you a deal. You do the project and you get on and you contribute back to ham radio, and you will have earned everything I paid for this stuff. And got all the stuff together and made my first contact and just kind of played around a little bit. And then I got really excited because it was just before Christmas, and at over the weekend between Christmas and New Year's, I studied real hard, and I got on the subway and went to New York and sat down, and I took my test to become a general. And at that time, a general and technician with the same theory. And I flunked. And I knew I could copy 20 words a minute without any trouble, but I flunked really badly. And everybody knows this famous guy. I forget his name now, in New York, but he had this great big long cigar, and he was kind of one of these guys that you just didn't want to get angry with him. And so he gave me the written test. He said, you can get your technician. So I did it, and he looked it over, and he says, wow, you got over 85% on that. He says, you got your general. He says, what the hell's the matter with your code? And I said, I'm scared. I said, I just got scared. He said, want to try it again, kid? And I went over and I sat down, and after just over a minute and a half, I knew it was perfect. I picked it up and handed it to him. He says, congratulations.
Wow.
I got into traffic handling and helping the Boy Scouts and lots of other things. And one day, another budding DXer who just passed away, unfortunately, W6PU, he was K2DGT. He came over and he called me and he said, why don't you come over to my house? I want to introduce you to somebody. And he took me over to W3UR, who was quite a DXer at the time. And he sat down and he showed me how to operate and how he made contacts. And I went home that night, and I didn't wake up. I didn't stop until 7 o'clock in the morning. I worked VK9RH on Norfolk Island, which was one of my first DX countries. And it all started. That was in 1954.
Very cool. And it's hard to let go once you start working them and you start confirming them. And then, we used to have that heartbreak of the not in log QSL, right, that you got in the mailbox, but there's been a lot of progress made since then. So you have this, I'll call it a almanac almost of the year in DX, and it is absolutely complete. It has a tremendous amount of information in it. It's typically 25 to 35 pages. I keep one here because, I like to look back like in June and July. So this will be my first 6-meter year because I have a 6-meter beam up finally. So it's kind of like what can I expect in May, June, and July? Well, let's go back and see what 2023 was like. So that's kind of what I use it for. So overall, what is your goal, Joe, when you put this together and put it out there?
Well, I try primarily to aim at the DXer, and I have this philosophy that I try to go by, and that is that I have my ideas are in three buckets. The first bucket is to appeal and do things that the average beginner can understand. And then I try to spend the majority of my time in the middle of the page trying to go the average guy in DXer. I mean, and then I always try to throw in the third part, which is the more technical stuff and or the stuff that maybe only the upper DXers would read. And I just showed you before, I have this book, and it's is about I don't know, like 30 or 40 sections here. And the first one shows all the countries of the world. You probably can't see it, but this year's activity. So
Wow.
that's marked next to everything I've worked. And then on the second page, I have the list of all the countries of the world. Whoops, what did I do?
You're good.
You're good. We see and hear you.
I
Yeah.
don't hear any. I'm not seeing myself anymore.
I was afraid you spilled your beer. That would be.
Well, if you still see me, then anyway, I have this page, and I keep track of all of the countries that have been active and the ones that I've worked. And then on the third page, the other most important one is I put down all the rare countries that are on the air, and put any pertinent deal information like how many countries they made or whatever. And then I just go down there, and I have another one on propagation, and then I have one on pirates, another one on silent keys and ARRL and technical and the whole thing. And I try to keep the information all year, and then at the end of the year, I page through it and try to put it all together and make it a comprehensive thing.
Yeah, and
And
about a week before Christmas, I'll check in with him and make sure he's getting the report all together. And sometimes family things take precedence, rightfully so. And I usually get in a copy of a rough draft of it right around Christmas. And the last 5 or 6 years, Frank W3LPL has gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, and then I look at it almost at the time of production. It usually comes out in a 8 to 10 page PDF and I add photos in of the most recent DXpeditions from that year, and we send it out usually a day or two after New Year's. And then about 30 days later, because it's a subscription thing, but K8CX, Tom Roscoe, puts it on his website. He has, I think, the last 20 plus years of the W1JR DXCC year-end reviews. So if you go to his website, I think it's like QSL Gallery. If you search QSL Gallery K8CX, you'll get to the website, and then just look at the W1JR DXCC year-end review, and they're all there.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes. Have you gotten some great feedback? I would imagine
Every year. And Joe's real gracious, and he allows, first of all, he sends it to the Daily DX, but second, he allows anybody to reprint it in their newsletter. I think you guys have done it a couple of times.
Yep.
There's several others that run it in their DX in their club newsletter, their monthly newsletter. But it's a fantastic, like you say, piece of history.
It really is. And I've run it, and thank you. Yeah, you guys have allowed me to do it at least 3 years in a row now in our club, but also I do the Ohio Section Journal. I'm the DX guy there, and I've run it there, divided up into 3 sections. But boy, the feedback I get is just terrific. They say, "Oh my God, I forgot all about this." And now, I had another guy send me an email said, "Now I know why I didn't do so well in the marathon. I missed all the stuff in this month or that month." And it's like, yeah, when you see it all together, it really says, you got to be in the chair, guys. You can't wait for the spot, and so, and I said this earlier, as much as I love the daily DX and all your extras and all the real-time DX information I can't get anywhere else, it also is nice to have a retrospect where I can look back and then use that data. Joe, did you have a question? GEX?
If I did, I forgot it.
Okay, I thought I saw you look up.
Oh, no, I just, you know me.
I do.
Yes,
I was mentioning that something
sorry about that.
something that Bernie said before, and I started in 1986, taking every country of the world and made the lists and all the inactivity things. So I have the records all the way back to 1986 of every country that has not been on the air during that particular year.
Wow.
Hmm.
So all the statistics are here, and each year at the end of the year, after I pack everything up, I just take the list and put the next year into it.
So,
But-
so this is obviously more than you just getting on the air and seeing who's on. Where do you get all your information?
Oh, well, I get a lot of it off the W3UR, the Daily DX. I get some from friends. There are some DX bulletins. I watch QRZ, and I particularly sort of hang out on DX Summit. I've had other troubles with other sections where I missed things that they were on one and not on another. But to me, that's the most reliable one. And the thing that, as I get older now, is instead of a little flag next to each one to tell what country is, they have the name written out on the side. So I can see that an AO is really Spain and not some rare stuff.
Yeah. So as I'm looking at the current one, and the thing that I think is really cool is the different sections, like band by band, right? And then month by month, and then the expeditions. And I don't know how I can't imagine the amount of time it takes you to take the same piece of data and put it in 2 or 3 different places, and then collect it
I
all.
wouldn't want to talk about time, because I probably wouldn't want to do it anymore. But I would say that the first thing, that's a big stretch doing it. That's a lot of work. But I think that the biggest problem I have each year is taking all this information, which is in a 2-inch binder, and trying to assemble it into a reasonable size, which I try to keep it at 8 pages, which I don't want anybody to get bored, and I don't want anybody to just read the first paragraph and then say, well, the hell with it, or I'll get to it another time. But I've tried to add different sections to it. I've added some technology, and as I said earlier, I'm going to add one new section this year, because all of a sudden it's coming up to the top of the heap is awards. DXCC was the big award, but now all of a sudden there's a number of awards coming out, and I think there's 2 or 3 lately. And when I got them, I made a special thing called just awards, and I just copy it off the printer and put it in a section and refer to it when the time comes.
Wow.
So Joe, you have to work on this pretty much every day, am I correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's daily.
sure.
And when I'm gone, I try to catch up. And unfortunately, my wife can't travel much anymore, so we're pretty well stuck at home, and she won't let me travel. That's why I haven't been to Dayton. I'd go in a minute, or Visalia if I could, but if she saw me with a ticket in my hand, that'd be the end of 61 years.
Wow. So the other section that unfortunately that continues to grow, and I did compare a couple of years, is the silent key. And that's always a really sad section to go through, because now I'm not nearly be in the community as you 3 have, but I'll recognize a certain call, or say, boy, I used to read that guy's stuff, or I can remember hearing this guy speak at the forum. And it's becoming a bigger section every year, and I wish it weren't, but it is.
Unfortunately, that's a tough thing, and I usually put it in the 7th or 8th page near the end a little bit, and I try to keep it down. I don't put everybody in there. My general rule is to put anybody that's prominent in the DX area, obviously.
Sure.
And people that have been on expeditions, and to some extent, I'll throw in a couple other ones where there's some prominent person at ARL or somebody else that may not be on the DX push, like Harry Daniels, who was one of my earlier friends in ham radio, W2HD. So, it's tough. It's a tough section, but I try to catch everything that I can, and I can't be perfect, but I do the best I can.
Hey,
Sure.
go with the data you have.
If you talk about silent keys, 10, 20, it's been about 35 of them already this year.
This year,
Gee.
wow.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
So I think you have a unique perspective if you were to look at all of them over the last 15 or 20 years. I mean, there's a couple of things, obviously, if I say to you, what trends have you seen? Well, clearly FT8 is one of them, FT4. I would also think SDR would have something maybe in there, but what else have you seen that, as you look year to year, what has kind of changed and improved the hobby?
Well, one of the things in it's been a negative from my point of view is technology. As I mentioned earlier, I had a real row with ARL, and if you guys in a couple of weeks, you'll see my new article in QST on, of all things, 2 and 6 meter Yagis. But in the column, there's a little red strip down one side of one page, and I had a terrible time getting them to put that information in because I devoted more than a dozen pages of Communications Quarterly, which ran out, and it was all about Yagis and what they can do, and then I had a special graph of shows the maximum possible gain that you can get on a Yagi per boom length, the true gain, and I have 3 lines. One is a good antenna, a crummy one, and one that's just peaked for that. And so I think that in technology, it's changed a little bit in that we were all gunning to get the antenna with the most gain or the best pattern or whatever. And now all of us, we just go down and we purchase an antenna. So, and the same thing with the rigs. We were always, I've noticed in technology, which happens, it's happening rather fast now again, is that you have a rig comes out and then you need a filter and you build an audio filter and you build another thing and this, and then as soon as it gets published or out there for a year or two, all of a sudden, boom, everybody's got it in their rig. And this latest trend now in this, like this K3S, for example, they not only have fantastic filters in the RF section, but they have fantastic audio filters, and they've added this equalization in this, and I'm trying to get together another paper, which I won't mention it now because it would cause a stir. It's somewhat ham radio related, and then on the other side not. And I put a lot of work into this paper and worked with a lot of experts in different fields to put this paper together. And I sent it to ARL, and a month later they sent it back and they said, we're not interested. If I told you the title, you'd know why they should be. So I'm trying to regenerate it now, and K5UR got really upset when he heard about this. And I'm going to try to convince ARL that this topic, which is a little bit off the line, but I think very, very important for older people, should be taken care of.
The thing though that came to mind when you were saying that, I've heard a lot of people, not a lot, but there are people that don't think FT8 is on the same plane as sideband and CW, and I get that to an extent. But my pushback would be, all these companies, ICOM, they're not going to create new radios if there isn't a market there, right? So there's got to be a market. So if that helps the market, and then I think it's good news that if someone comes out with some enhancement, that all of these vendors see a market there to take that enhancement and incorporate it in their radio, so they can say, okay, we're going to sell a bunch of these, so I want to make this change. So I understand what you're saying. And I can remember in the old days, we would build SCAF filters and all those other kinds of things that you just had to have. and all of a sudden the next rig you get has all that built into it. So I get what you're saying, but I also think it's maybe good news because the market must be good enough that they can take the time to put those investment dollars back in the radios. So
Well, I guess what I was trying to get to was that the technology has changed and people just go buy a radio now and they don't even know how half the features work, but they got a radio and they get on and they make contacts and they don't think of all the technology and what's gone into it to make it that way. And a lot of the stuff really, when you come down to it, is based on DX because DX needs good filtering in the RF and in the audio. So that you can understand, it's got same sideband when it came on, when I first got on after on the air a few years back in the 50s, AM was a big deal. And you sat down and listened to these double sideband signals that were 6 or 8 kc wide, and they each one splattered into the next guy, and then sideband came along, and I remember sitting down in at the operating position. When I went to Navassa Island, there was no sideband in 1957 when I operated from there. It was just CW, and we did a few AM contacts just to make people happy. But when I went to VP2VB in 58, we sat there and we worked CW, and then we went up and we sat down on 14-195, which at that time was outside the band for US, and we listened up the band, and then occasionally we would go up to 14-315 or 305 and listen down. And that was the big thing, was sideband was just coming in. And just to give you an example of how much it was just coming in and how technology plays this thing is, I was listening one night and I said to the guys, all right, I'm listening on 275, and I went down to 275 and was guys, and I worked and split, and there was no problem working guys. And all of a sudden I heard this screaming and yelling so I finally said, all right, everybody just stop. I want to hear what's going on 14-175. The guy that's on there that's trying to get me, call me with a long call and tell me what your problem is. And the guy finally comes on and he calls and calls and calls, and he says, I'm using a KWM1 and I can't get the thing to move 35 kilohertz. That's enough to catch you. So I stood by for 15 seconds and I back and forth, and I worked him, and he was happy. But it wasn't too long after that. I had worked a fairly rare one at that time, Qatar MP4 QAL, and he wrote me a letter and he said he wanted to work me on sideband, and I said fine. So he got on one night on 14-305 and listened down at 14-195, and I worked him for a new one, and he said, gee, this is really neat. I just love this. I said, well, why don't you go ahead and work a whole bunch of guys? So he stood by and he worked about 30 or 35 guys, and I thought that was really great. About a month later, I started getting letters from everybody and said, he won't QSL, he won't respond. So I wrote back to him and said, what's the story? And he said, I was so excited to work with you and the United States for the first time on sideband. And he says, I didn't keep a logbook that night.
Oh, gee.
wow.
So frustrating.
I've not heard that one before. So
Yeah.
So Bernie, what kind of trends? I mean, we really look forward to having you present to us every year on the top 10 or top 25, whatever it is, who's coming up, and any secrets you can share with us. But overall, what do you see? We've talked about this annual compendium, but now in real time, what do you kind of see as the big changes that are either coming and that are already implemented, and how things are changing? Because I think you got a really good looking forward viewpoint, I think.
Yeah, I guess. I think one of the concerns that I have is some of these islands that don't allow the expeditions to go there. It's becoming more and more prevalent in the US with our territory, some of our territories, Australia, New Zealand. There's some real eco concerns that are going on. One of the good things that's come out of this, in my mind, is the RIBs, the radio in a box.
Yep.
I think that is just an absolute fantastic project, because it's going to allow us the possibilities to put these RIBs on the islands, set it up and get off the island as quick as possible. I know they're going to do that for the upcoming Jarvis DXpedition N5J in August. They've done it at VP6 on what was it, Pitcairn or
Yes.
Ducey? I forget.
Juicy,
Well,
Yeah,
Ducey,
Ducey.
yeah, but
juicy.
They've done it on a couple of the FO
Mhm.
French Polynesia Islands, you know, testing their system to make sure it works. And I think there's some possibilities we might be able to see some of the rarer ones come on with the successes of these and with the Fish and Wildlife Service's approval. You know, they're going to be, as my understanding is, they're going to be paying real close attention as to what's going on with Jarvis.
Yeah.
So that's an exciting thing to see, but it is concerning to me about some of these entities that just won't allow you to go there. And I don't think we should delete them. Don't get me wrong. I don't think we should delete them just because no one can get there. Eventually things change. They always are changing. Life is always full of changes.
Yeah.
And it's going to take the right person in the right place at the right time to get on for some of these rarer ones. And that's why they're rare. That's all part of it. So that's my thought on that.
There is one potential rare one which is sitting there right now, and it was even in the news tonight for the wrong reasons. But the breakaway part of Papua New Guinea, and that looks like it's going to slated for later this decade. So there's a possibility.
Bougainville, yes.
oh, that's right.
It'll be interesting to watch that. Yes. That's
thought
about the only new one out there that I'm aware of.
I was wondering now that Korea has opened their borders up to the Soviet Union for tourist travel and some sort of a cultural exchange. I was wondering if maybe some of the Soviet guys might say, "Hey, you know, we can take a group down there," and maybe not. I was just hoping that might happen, though.
Yeah.
You're talking about North Korea?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to get involved in all the different situations that have taken place there, but I don't know. Regime change sometimes happens. I remember for years and years trying to work Albania, and now
Oh yeah,
it's everywhere.
yeah.
And it wasn't that many years ago. I want to say it was S5, Slovenia, or one of those groups over there was off the air for a couple of years. They just ceased operation, and so this is part of the exciting thing of the ham radio. You know, it's always interesting.
Yeah, it is, and my grandson is really into the history of World War II. I'm not sure why, but it seems to have piqued his interest. So we spent some time going over, you know, what was East Germany? Oh, let me show you these cards, and here was Berlin. So I think a lot of us, when we can look back over time, there's a lot of really neat world affairs and geography that affect what we do and what we're allowed to do, and I think we take that for granted sometimes.
Well, one of the things that I like in ham radio, which is so interesting, is to actually know the world situation. And when somebody says that Iraq is throwing something up in the air, and Iran and Syria and everything, and then I get involved with one of my closest grandsons who's just stationed, all of a sudden shipped over to one of those countries on a mission, I worry, but
Sure.
You get to know all the ins and outs, and I have visited a lot of these places in strange situations where we walked on the Golan Heights, and now all of a sudden it's really Syria. At that time, Israel was in charge. So you get a good view of not only history, but geography. And I think geography is important. There's so many people in this world that they haven't got a clue where the Union of South Africa is, or Egypt, or anything. It boils me that they don't teach anything in schools anymore.
But I wonder if it's a US thing, because I know our news is, honestly, it's all about the US. You almost never hear story after story of what's going on in the world. It just doesn't happen. It's got to be like, you know, really top line in order to hear what's going on. like Ukraine, because of the war. But, geography and the news, I think, is a big thing here in the US. I think. I don't know. I think outside the US, they know a lot more about what's going on in the world than most of the
We do.
Americans.
Yes.
I know so many foreigners, and I know that they know
Yeah.
what's going on, and they know specific things that you hadn't even thought about.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Well, Joe, Joe WGEX, did I leave anything out or any other
No.
questions pop up or?
No, you're doing good. I've had a busy day, and I just came in from the field, and so I just wasn't as prepared as I should have been. But no, you covered all the good questions, Bill.
See, I was very disappointed in Joe today because they sent me a picture of this 500-foot trench that's 36 inches deep. I just assumed it was like some new hard line he was putting in, but it's something about drainage. So I don't know what he's thinking.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, maybe you
I
could
was
do
more
that.
interested in replacing a clay tile that was all broken up. Been in
Yeah.
there probably 60 years, 70 years, who knows?
Yeah. So
Oh,
Bernie,
I think we covered everything good, Bill.
Well,
Bernie,
the other
anything?
thing is that you have to think about all the gear and the outside and all the rest of the problems. And we had an ice storm here about 3 or 4 weeks ago, followed by a windstorm, and I lost all my VHF antennas
Oh, gee.
at the 110-foot level, and I had to be at 110-foot level to get over the hill on the other side, and the whole mast went over 90 degrees.
Oh, God.
And we sent the crew up there Friday, and the crew came right back down, and I said, "Oh, that was awful quick. How did it go?" And they said, "It didn't. We're going to call a crane crew."
Oh.
So now I'm up getting a 110-foot crane and a bucket to put these guys up there so they can cut the antennas down.
Gee.
Oh my
And
God.
6 meters is coming.
Yes, yes,
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Good.
soon.
yes. Hopefully soon is right. We're ready.
So Bernie, any follow-up thoughts or anything I didn't ask or should have asked or?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you asked me. You got to ask Joe, W1JR, about his first DXpedition. And how
Oh,
old was he? And who did he go with? And where did he go? And that day, and that day, how rare was that country?
hey, Joe.
So tell us, Joe.
That's a long story. My buddy W2HMJ then and I were always discussing new countries back in the that was about 1967, 57, I guess. And we were always looking at these different places, and they became less and less rare. And he kept after me on this Navassa Island. And I did a little research, and I found out that the Coast Guard went to Navassa Island every 6 months to change the gas bottles. Being a stupid, not stupid, but a forward type of person, I just got my pen out and I wrote a letter to the head of the Coast Guard, Admiral head of the Coast Guard in Washington, D.C. And I said, "I hear your ship goes out there every time." And I said, "I would think it'd be nice if you would let me go on one of these trips as a civilian and do a little ham radio." And he wrote back a letter and he said, "Yeah, it sounds like a pretty darn good idea, but the ship
Really?
will be in a week." So it took me a little bit more than a week. Bill Harrison, I called him and he gave me all kinds of gear, and we put a lot of stuff in. And I set everything up in the backyard in a ground plane antenna for 20 meters and made a circle. And I put everything into that and borrowed a generator from a friend of mine and made sure that everything would work in that circle. And I couldn't have anything outside of the circle. So in a week, and so I called my buddy Fred, was W2R, WC. Unfortunately, K6 Triple S is now a silent key recently too. My close buddy, but I said, "Would you like to go?" And he says, "Yes, but I gotta, what's the story?" And I said, "Well, we gotta be down there on this Sunday for the ship." And I called the captain of the ship and he was very upset. He was on leave at the time and he didn't want us to go, but when he heard that Admiral so-and-so in Washington said I could go, he decided that we would go. So Fred says, I got a prom. And I say, well, how's it going to work? He says, well, I'll be out of the prom at 5 o'clock in the morning. So it's 6 o'clock in the morning on Long Island. I drove up to his house and picked Fred up and all the gear, and we drove nonstop to Miami. Got there and brought all the gear up to the ship, and the captain came out and he said, what the hell's going on here? He said, well, Admiral so-and-so gave us permission to go on this trip. And he says, well, I don't know about that. And just about then, some Coast Guard guy on the ship, the Coast Guard, it was a Coast Guard ship, said, hi, Fred. Buddy from high school. And he got a crew together, and they all ran down the gangplank before the captain could say anything. They picked all of our gear up and up onto the ship.
So he was coming from his prom. So he was how old?
Fred was, I was 20 and he was 19.
Wow.
Gee.
Holy cow.
So
Young
we went on
boys.
this, we went down there, and when we got there, oh, that was another, we got there, it was choppy and bad weather and everything. And finally I said to one of the guys after they had a few trips to the vessel, I said, we got to get on the air. What are we going to do? And again, his buddy got everybody together, and they redistributed everything. They took Fred and I over to the island, and we got up and started working, and found out there were no antennas. So I took and made an artificial ground plate on a rock behind a rock, and we set up the gear, and I made my first contact with W3UR, who was pushing me, and the second load receiver just overloaded right after that. It was KV4AA calling me. And so we made a few contacts, and we didn't get the antenna for a while, and then none of the ship came out, and they had another antenna, another ground plane. We got that, and then the ship broke down. And we were the only there, and these guys hated the job of carrying these gas bottles. It was quite a thing, and I made some trips up to the top and saw everything, and we did the best we could. And in the afternoon, they said, we've had it. We got to get out of here. We're not going to stay overnight. So we had to cut our operation short.
Oh.
And we had to stop.
So you were only there for one day, Joe?
We were only on the island for 12, 13 hours.
Wow.
And then,
Really?
so we got back on the ship, and the captain said, we're going to go tending buoys for the next week and a half. And I said, I got a business. I got to get back to work. Said, what do you mean you got to get back to work? I said, I can't be on this chasing buoys. I've got to get back to the mainland sometime. He says, well, come and see me in the morning. So in the morning, I got up to have breakfast, and I went in to see the captain, and there was the captain standing, and I said, where are we? And he said, we're in Guantanamo Bay. I said, what? He said, yeah, we're in Guantanamo Bay. So he said, we're going to offload you. You can't take the gear with you. So Fred and I got off. We put the logs up underneath our shirt, and Fred knew 6 words of Spanish. I knew none. And he got a local guy, and the guy got us on a bus and took us to Guantanamo City and helped us get some tickets and everything. And we finally got across the whole place, and when we got to Havana, we were waiting for the flight to take us to Miami, and they get, oh, it's the next day. We waited. We went down there the next morning, and they looked at us, and they had to fill all this paper. And the guy said to me, where'd you guys come from? How'd you get here? How did you get into Cuba? I said, I know, we just walked off the ship. Where are your papers?
Here we are.
Yeah. So he ushered us, he shuffled us all off into a little side room and made us fill out the paperwork. And we told him a great story. And he said, you can't give these papers to anybody until you're in the United States. So we were kind of shivering, and we got on the plane, and we were trying ice, and we refused to give them any papers. And we got in Miami, they wanted the papers. They said, follow us. So we ran down the gangplank, and when we got to the end, we handed all the papers and we ran. We're back in the US.
Holy
A week
smokes.
later, W3DUR was an pilot for the Eastern Airlines, and he made several trips to San Juan, and he finally located the ship and got the gear, put it in a locker, and then he was shuffled it back and forth, and finally got it back. But
Gee.
then he put the gear in the back of his car one night, and he parked his car to have dinner with his wife in Times Square. And when he came out, all the gear was in Dewar's whiskey boxes, and most of the Dewar's whiskey boxes were gone.
Oh,
So Harrison lost his receivers and transmitters, and
oh,
Harry Giles lost his private special bug, and everybody else that we had borrowed.
oh my gosh.
So the expeditions can be very exciting.
For a
They
lot of
still-
different reasons.
Yeah. They still are exciting.
Man, oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Bernie, anything else I didn't ask? See, Joe, it's always good to have friends like Bernie, you know?
Yeah. Oh my God, yes.
No, I think that's it. I'll save some of my other Joe stories for later.
Well, Joe, I will tell you a story, and I don't know, I assume Bernie will remember this, but 5 or 6 years ago, we were putting on a DX convention in this area, W8 DXCC. So the first guy I thought of was Bernie. So I call him out of the blue, never talked to him. I think we had email correspond a little bit. He says, "How can I help you?" And I said, "Well, you know, there's this new president. I don't know if you remember this, Joe or Bernie." I said, "And I have a relative who's now in the State Department in North Korea. And he's going to get me and 3 other guys in there with operating privilege that I already have. Can you help me?" And there was 10 seconds of absolute silence. And then he says, "Wait a minute, who is this?" So then I had to come clean and say, "No, I don't know anybody, but here's what I got." So I think what happened was the idea of coming out here for a convention seemed good against going over to North
Yeah.
Korea. So
Yeah.
I set it up well. But anyway, so that's my Bernie story. Well, guys, I appreciate it, man. We've had a heck of a good time, and my whole goal was to kind of get exposure to this terrific work you're doing. And Bernie, you give him the vehicle to do this and get it out, and I think that's terrific. And
Believe
Joe
it
and
or
I
not,
promote.
I look forward to his invitation each year because I never know in early December or late November if he's going to ask me to do it one.
No, I usually ask you in the summer. I do it in the summer, and then I check back in
Yes.
November or December.
Yeah.
You could ask him now and save yourself a trip, you know?
Joe, are you ready to do the 2024 W1JR DXCC year-end review? Would you like to do it again?
I think so. Otherwise, I was going to go to the trash heap tonight.
Thank you, Joe, for all your
Boy.
years. Again, the K8CX website has all the past ones that we've produced. And it's got some really good things in there for the new DXers too, and reminders for us old timers of some things to do or not to do. Joe always puts some good tidbits in there for everybody, whether they're a new guy or a very experienced guy.
I
Definitely
have to
worth
tread
looking
on
at.
water a little bit because I hate to put about operating procedures each year because so many things, a couple of years I've just said refer back to last year or that.
Yeah.
There are so many things that that are disturbing all the time, and I'm getting to make more mistakes myself nowadays. And with a new rig, I forget to hit the split button or something. But I wish that people would stop this business of coming on and cursing and there's a guy in France that's constantly putting up notices, nasty stuff about FT8 wrecking the hobby and all this stuff, and we just have to be a little bit more tolerant and try to teach these newer people how to operate. And calling a guy an idiot right off is pretty bad. And getting on a frequency and saying up 8 or 10 times is ridiculous. All you have to do is do it 2 or 3 times, and then maybe a repeat. But try to help people, and if we would help people and teach them how to operate better, we will all work more DX. The other thing that's bothering me lately, and I don't know how I don't know whether I completely understand it or not, but I think I do. But I think that these expeditions, I mean, 40, 50, 60 words a minute is not going to bother me, but it's going to bother a lot of people. And I see these expeditions now running up in the high 30s. And again, doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother a lot of people, but I think a lot of people now are starting to copy on their keyboards and their computers, and they don't know the code. And the guy goes over and at high speed, and this back, 1, 2, 3, 4. The computers can't keep up with him, and the guy doesn't respond right away. And then they have to send the call a second time, or maybe the third time. And I've heard him as high as 5 times. And there's 5 contacts that went down the tube while
Yeah.
that's going on. And I don't know what to do. I don't want to criticize the DXpeditions and say, slow down a little bit, but sometimes some of these things are getting a little bit out of hand.
Yeah.
Good points. Good
All
points.
good advice, Joe.
Yeah. And I know one thing that both Joe, my Joe, so to speak, and Jay, K4ZLE, is two of the guys that have given me a ton of stuff over the years. And it always comes down to get in front of the radio and listen. You've flat got to listen.
I
And Joe,
say
you have
that
a,
so many times, listen. I
Oh.
don't even do it anymore because I think people are gonna get tired of hearing me say, listen.
and Joe has a great story. Who was it, Joe, that was it James Brooks you were listening to and he just threw a frequency out all of a sudden? What was that?
It was on Scarborough, and we was on 20 meters, and I don't know, 14,200, and I'm just, calling like everybody, and then all of a sudden, James Brooks said 257. And I thought, well, that's funny. Why did that guy? And I didn't know him at the time. And I thought, well, that's strange. That guy said 257. So I immediately go up to 257 and made one call and worked him. And then afterwards, we were on Midway together, and just a good guy. But the story, like Bill said, you really need to listen. There's a lot of truth into that. Yeah, if it hadn't been for listening, I would have missed him altogether. And that's the only contact I ever made with Scarborough.
Wow. Well, very good. Well, Joe Reisert, anything I missed or you want to throw in here or?
Well, the biggest thing that I hint at each year in my yearly review, and I barely ever get an answer, is did I miss anything? Is there some subject or topic that's of interest, especially, and I have added stuff on VHF lately because it's getting, especially since the DXCC has moved up now to 50 megahertz. So I try to include some stuff in there, but if there's anything that I can put in the reports or the yearly thing or some particular section or something that I'm missing, I try to cover all the subjects that I can think of, and yeah, that's where I am.
The section that I always stop and read, and it's usually just maybe a paragraph or two, is safety. Because you think back and say, oh yeah, there was, I'm embarrassed to say I can't think of his call, but there was the ham up in Minnesota that fell off his tower, and then there was the German in Aruba, and this happens way too often.
I've been having I added safety a few years ago.
Yeah.
I've been putting some of that stuff in, and we had a year or two where I hopefully there were no silent keys as a result of that. But last year, or 2 years ago, that was pretty bad when those people went. And W0 LA, what the heck was this called? Famous DXer up in Minnesota that fell off his tower.
Yeah.
Ralph Bittner. W0
AIH.
AIA.
That's it.
Yes.
That's
45 towers in his yard, and
Yes.
something goes wrong, and my wife has now prohibited me from climbing after I hit 80 a number of years ago. So that's why I had the crew over here the other day. She won't let me even touch the tower. And I've had numerous problems where I could have just run up and fixed something real quick, but stay off the air.
Yeah.
Yeah. Poor old Ralph had been up those towers probably 1,000,000 times.
Yeah.
And then,
The nicest guy. And
yeah.
I've had a lot of safety comments too. I don't want to prolong this session anymore about when I finally got my first safety belt after some 20 years in ham radio, which I'm not very proud of. But it's safety is such an important thing. Although on the other hand, now we have a new situation in ham radio now where instead of us fixing our antennas and everything, everybody's hiring somebody, and we've got these guys that run around and take care of our equipment and climb our towers for us.
Yeah. The one section I might recommend for 2024 would be DX podcast. I'm just throwing that out. It's just something that hit me.
Well,
your interest.
Maybe you could call it the DX mentor.
Feed me some information on it, and feed me some stuff to say about it, and give me a couple of examples and
Yeah,
I'll
I've got,
get-
there's several out there that are really, really good. So I'll be happy to do that. I'll send it to you and, but I like where Bernie's going. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was really enjoyable. It truly was. And I've been looking forward to this all day. And, again, Joe, I think the work you do in pulling all that together is terrific. I think it's a resource that not enough people are nearly taking advantage of. And again, Bernie, I started to say a minute ago, I appreciate you being the vehicle for that, and also what you provide for us in real-time DX information and leading edge stuff. I mean, everybody knows when they want to get the word out, they contact Bernie, and I think that's really important. It's a huge resource. And I've said this before to you, and I mean it sincerely. I'm fortunate to be a 321, but I'll bet the last 40 have had a lot to do with your information. Finding out where they're at, when they're going to be on, how to, as we joke in the commercial that we made, it's like, I even know what they're using. And that's true. You do, and that's just great information. I'll tell you, I truly appreciate it. And I think you do a great service. And Joe, as always, well, Joe's got something. What's he got?
let's not
Bernie, every morning when I get your bulletin,
There you go.
I put my posting notes on there.
That's a true
Okay.
story.
Yeah, and they go all over.
I know I've said it to him a number of times, and Bernie is probably involved in it too, but maybe Bernie can pass it on again, but I really do appreciate it, and the W3LPO propagation things and keeping it up. And if anybody, you were really closely watching, I think we just hit the highest sunspot cycle in something like 20 or 30 years the other day, or a day or two ago. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. The sunspot cycle is something that, of course, I've been fortunate to have gone through the biggie and not realizing it at the time what it was, and through several others. But the prognostication of what's happening now, we had this gang of 150 so-called experts saying that it was going to be a slow cycle and it was going to be peaking in 25. And then we had this little group of isolated people down here saying it's not going to be a slow, it's going to be a better one, and it's going to peak a little bit earlier. So I'm watching the data real closely because it's a possibility that one of the prognosticators was saying April of 2014 by 24 was going to be the big peak, and boy, just follow it.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, so somebody needs to give me a glimpse into what do you expect out of 6 meters and when this year?
Well, 6 meters has changed dramatically. We had these unbelievable solar cycle things that happened. The first big one when only one station in Europe had a license, EI2W, whatever it was, in 1980, and he would come on every day and the receiver would rock over to the pin, and he was the only one licensed, and a few of us worked him. So those are the years when we didn't have many countries. And then we had the next few peaks were really fantastic, but the F2 has gone down now with the solar cycle. But in a sense, 6 meters is really peculiar now because the FT8 has taken over. And there's virtually nothing, and there's very little DX except a few guys in Europe or Africa may exchange some contacts, but they rarely work into the United States anymore on the CW or sideband anymore. So unfortunately, everybody is glued to 14 or 50.313, and it's really switched over, and it's opened up the bands when they normally wouldn't be. If things go the way they are now, there's a possibility starting around November 1st to about February 15th that we may have some more F2. There's been a little bit here and there, but there's just nothing compared to what we had, even as short of deal as 2010, I guess, was last big one. So I look forward to that because it's after you've worked 392 countries, it's got to be something else. Now all my buddies have just thrown me out, and they've all gotten EME now behind them, and so I'm Mr. Nobody on 6 meters anymore.
Well, I'm trying to find, I'm being a little rude looking away, but there was an article that K9LA put together, Carl, and he was proposing, I'll find it and put it in the show notes, but he was proposing that FT8 and FT4 are kind of defying propagation, and he was going into some of the math behind it and why maybe in the down years we'd still be able to work some significant amount of DX using those two digital low noise propagation methods, and that'll be interesting to see. So
It does happen. I did work a few Europeans this year, but with a very marginal, small, short openings. So you just got to be. But if it wasn't for FT8 on 6 meters, I hate to say it right now, we wouldn't be probably working any DX.
wow, okay.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, guys. Well, I truly appreciate it, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and maybe we'll do it next year sooner and review the year. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's no ice
We
storm.
can't do it till after the first of the year, and
No,
it'd be
I know.
30
Well,
days later, so somebody
gonna say-
won't steal it.
Yeah, so February 1st, we'll get together and see what's going on. And Bernie, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, and I've got you a good seat right up front, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And we'll see who the CQDX Hall of Fame inductees are and the DX Position of the Year. We're excited to find out, aren't we, Joe?
Yeah, buddy.
So we'll see.
Well, Bernie and
Guys,
Joe.
please give my regards to everybody out there. As I said, my wife won't let me travel anymore, but I'll be thinking about you guys when you're in Dayton.
Okay.
Well, Joe and Bernie, thanks a million, guys, for your time. We really, really appreciate it. It's been very, very interesting. Good podcast.
Yep, very good.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Joe, GEX, and JR. Thanks for doing those reports and
Yep.
coming on.
Good to see your face for a change.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll see you in the pileups.
All right, we'll
There
see
you
you in the
go.
pileups. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
I hope you found that as interesting and entertaining as I did. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the DX Mentor. I would like to thank our sponsors, ICOM America, the Daily DX, DX Engineering, and the Southwest Ohio DX Association. You won't find anyone more committed to DX than these sponsors. I would especially like to thank our guests today, Joe, W1JR, Bernie, W3UR, and Joe, W8GEX. I would love to have your feedback, answer your questions, and provide help with any DX or amateur-related issues that you may have. If you need clarification on something or you just have a question, you can email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Please drop me a line if you've achieved an all-time new one, receive recognition, or have a DX event that you would like us to mention. We'd be happy to do that. If you're enjoying the DX Mentor episodes, please hit the subscribe button. You can also click like if you found any of them particularly interesting. If you don't want to subscribe, please drop me a note and let me know why. I sincerely am interested and I want to get better. Again, it's thedxmentor@gmail.com. 7-3 for this episode, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I'll see you in the pileups.